Welcome to Unit 5, Lesson 4, The American Revolution, War in the Middle States. Have you ever been surprised when a team that seems to have no chance at all actually wins the big game? The Continental Army was that kind of team. Despite its disadvantages, the Continental Army managed to win important battles early on in the American Revolution. Creating an army. In 1775, Great Britain had one of the most powerful armies in the world. Its soldiers were well trained, experienced professionals, and about 42,000 of them came to fight in the colonies. Great Britain was prepared to meet the troops' needs for arms and other supplies. The British also hired Hessian soldiers to join them in the colonies, about 30,000 men. These mercenaries, or soldiers who are paid to fight for a country other than their own, further swelled the number of British forces. On September 9, 1776, the Continental Congress voted to rename the colonies the United States of America. But the new nation did not have a strong central government. Congress did not have the power to provide funding for arms, other supplies, or soldiers' pay. This situation didn't change until the next year, when the Continental Congress drafted and adopted the Articles of Confederation in 1777. Under the Articles of Confederation, the 13 states mostly governed themselves as small republics. A republic is a form of government in which the people elect representatives to speak for them and enact laws based on the people's needs. James Madison helped organize the state government of Virginia. The Articles granted Congress the authority to call on states to help fund the war. Compared with the British Army, the young Continental Army was ill-prepared and disorganized. The Patriots had other problems as well. George Washington faced a huge challenge in turning a collection of local militias into a disciplined, united fighting force. He also had trouble recruiting more troops. Few eligible men had formal military training, and many were unwilling to leave their farms or jobs. Also, not everyone was eager for independence. Families and communities found themselves split between loyalists and patriots. Both free and enslaved African Americans were in a unique situation when it came to deciding where their loyalties lay. The British promised freedom to many enslaved people if they promised to fight on the British side. Other African Americans, both free and unfree, were motivated to try to secure freedom for all and served in the war with the Patriots. In 1776, only around 20,000 men had joined the Continental Army. But despite this and its numerous other problems, the Continental Army did have some advantages over the British. Most importantly, its soldiers were fighting a defensive war, or a war to protect one's own land on familiar ground, while the British Army was far from home, and Americans were fighting for their homes and way of life.
In the U.S., we love our Constitution. But it wasn't always this way. Before the Constitution and government we have today, we had a sort of prototype constitution called the Articles of Confederation, which created a nation of independent states only loosely linked together by a single Congress. The Founding Fathers intentionally designed a nation with a very weak central government. There was no judicial branch, no executive branch, so there was no president, which when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You know, the colonists had just been through a really bad breakup with the British king, and they're not about to get back together with a government who looked just like their ex, okay? We've all made that mistake before. okay? You go and date a girl like the last girl you dated, you're gonna get hurt, okay? Don't do this to yourself. The Congress, which was just a single chamber with a delegate from every state, did have some power, like the authority to make treaties and alliances, maintain an army, and coin money. But they couldn't levy the taxes to pay for those things. In fact, under the Articles of Confederation, paying federal taxes was voluntary for the states, who of course were like, no thanks, we're good. The US had borrowed money from European investors and nations to pay for the Revolutionary War, but with no power to tax, the United States couldn't pay back any of those debts, creating a huge economic disaster by 1787. With no funds and limited power, the central government couldn't do much to protect peace at home. This became abundantly clear during Shays' Rebellion in 1786, when farmers in Massachusetts violently protested against the state's high taxes. So if the Articles of Confederation weren't working, why didn't they just make changes to it? Well, it was practically impossible. Amendments to the Articles needed unanimous consent, and the delegates from the 13 states had more opinions than a YouTube comment section. By the way, you should comment on this video right now. Say something nice about it. This weak Congress and a broke, ineffective federal government eventually proved to be too much of a burden on the United States. Because when 13 different state governments held all the power, nothing was getting accomplished. The Founding Fathers found this out the hard way. So they went back to the drawing board, drafting a new and improved Constitution, which is still the law of our land today.
Early victories and defeats. Even though the Revolution started in New England, it quickly spread to the middle states of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. In July 1776, British troops landed on New York's Staten Island and pushed American troops back to Manhattan Island and then New Jersey. The Continental Army soon had to escape across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. But the Continental Army had a change of luck by the end of the year. When they crossed the icy Delaware River on Christmas Day, Washington and his troops surprised and defeated the Hessian defenders in Trenton, New Jersey. The Hessian commander had received orders to build defenses around Trenton, but he had ignored them. On the night before the battle, he got a message informing him that the Continental Army was on its way. He ignored this as well, and the result was a major defeat for the British. After the American victory, called the Battle of Trenton, British General William Howe withdrew most of his army back to New York. In the words of one British soldier, the Americans had become a formidable, which also means fearsome, enemy. This victory resulted in a wave of support and enthusiasm for the American cause, which encouraged recruitment and greater victories. Just a quick review before we end the video. In 1775, Great Britain had one of the most powerful armies in the world. America adopted the Articles of Confederation. This was considered the first constitution. In 1777, few men wanted to leave their homes and jobs to join the Continental Army. But because of the victory in the Battle of Trenton, where George Washington led his troops across the Delaware River to surprise and defeat the Hessian troops in New Jersey, this allowed more people to want to become part of the American fight. That's all for today's video.